I was halfway through my shift at the factory when my phone buzzed in my pocket, right as I was trying to convince a 50-year-old conveyor belt not to collapse in the middle of the night. For a second, God help me, I thought maybe it was my dad finally sending something decent. An apology, maybe? Or just a normal update that didn't come with a backhand. Wishful thinking. I pulled off my work glove with a snap and unlocked my phone. The screen glowed with a new message in the family group chat. Dad. Trip only for successful kids. Not for poor factory worker like you. I stared at it, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something less humiliating. They didn't. The conveyor belt clattered behind me. Even the machine seemed embarrassed on my behalf. I read the message again, then a third time. My stomach did this awful twist, like the moment you realize you've waved at someone who wasn't waving at you. Only 1,000 times worse. You'd think after years of being the designated disappointment, I'd be numb. But apparently, there's always one more layer of humiliation waiting to peel back. I tried to laugh it off, but all that came out was a noise that sounded suspiciously like a dying goat. My coworker glanced over. I turned away fast, pretending I'd just remembered something urgent about the hydraulic press. I scrolled up the chat, hoping, pathetically, that maybe it was a joke. Maybe my dad had finally discovered irony. Nope. Just Ethan bragging about closing another real estate deal and Harper posting photos of her new luggage like it was the second coming of Samsonite. All with Dad's proud little thumbs up emojis. My name was nowhere. Not even a pity mention. It wasn't like this was the first time. I'd been the family's cautionary tale since the day I told them I wasn't going to college. Dad's face had gone blank, like he was trying to remember where he'd gone wrong. You're going to waste your life, he'd said, sounding personally offended that I liked working with my hands. I tried to explain that I didn't want a mountain of debt. That I liked honest work. That I didn't mind earning my place inch by inch. He looked at me the same way he looked at the dog when it peed on the rug. After that, it was open season on my choices. Any time I visited, it was like they were reading from a script. Ethan's closing deals left and right. Harper just got promoted. And Dylan is doing something. Something. That was my title, Dylan occupation, something. I slipped my phone back in my pocket and pressed my palm against the cold steel railing. My throat felt tight, but not from sadness. From the white-hot realization that I'd let them shrink me down to nothing. Another message buzzed through. Dad again. Try not to be too jealous. Maybe if you'd applied yourself, you'd be here with us. There it was. The cherry on top of the condescension sundae. I swallowed hard. For a moment, I almost typed something back. An apology. An explanation. A plea. But then I looked around the factory floor, dingy, sure, but honest. This place never pretended to be anything it wasn't. Unlike my family. And that was the moment I knew, if they didn't want me on their trip, fine. I'd take one of my own. And while they were toasting themselves for being successful, I'd be somewhere better. Somewhere they'd never imagine a poor factory worker could go. My hands stopped shaking. I picked up my wrench and got back to work, already planning the best revenge I'd ever tasted. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment to the faint drip of the leaky faucet I still hadn't fixed. The place was small, drafty, and smelled faintly of machine oil from my work clothes. But it was mine, paid for with my own sweat, not Dad's approval. I lay there for a minute, staring at the water spot on the ceiling, letting the memory of that text sink in all over again. Trip only for successful kids. God, the way he worded it. Like I was some stray dog sniffing around the back porch. I thought back over the years, and it hit me how many times they tried to make sure I knew my place. There was my high school graduation, when Ethan got a brand new car and I got a pat on the shoulder and a brochure about local trade schools. Just in case college doesn't work out. There was Thanksgiving 3 years ago, when I mentioned I'd been promoted to shift supervisor. Dad nodded vaguely, then launched into a 10-minute speech about Harper's incredible trajectory, as if I hadn't spoken. There were all the birthdays where I got gift cards with half the balance used up because they just grabbed something on the way. Meanwhile, Ethan unwrapped gadgets and Harper got jewelry she'd never wear. But the worst was probably the Christmas I saved for months to buy them a new fridge. Their old one was dying a slow, loud death. I worked double shifts, skipped meals to afford it, and when I finally rolled it into the kitchen, I felt like maybe, just maybe, they'd see me differently. Dad looked at the brand logo like he'd found a cockroach. Huh, he said, non-committal. Well, that's thoughtful. Then he turned to Ethan to ask about stock tips. If you'd asked me last year, I would have told you I was used to it. That I'd built up some kind of emotional callus. But lying in bed, I realized it wasn't a callus. It was a wound that never healed because I kept hoping it might. I pulled my phone off the nightstand and scrolled through the group chat again. Ethan had posted a photo of his airport outfit, designer sneakers and a smug grin. Harper had chimed in with her usual hashtags. Hashtag family trip, hashtag blessed, hashtag success. I felt something between rage and ridiculous amusement. They really believed this trip was a badge of honor. Like the universe had personally handed them an invitation because they were so superior. My phone buzzed again, a text from Mom, probably thinking she was softening the blow. Mom, we love you, Dylan. We just thought this vacation might not be your style. I read it twice, then burst out laughing. The kind of laugh that edges too close to tears. My style? What did she think my style was, crying into a microwave burrito while they sipped cocktails in Fiji? No. Not this time. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and stood up. My body ached from the factory floor, but my head was clear in a way it hadn't been in years. If they wanted to pretend I was some sad cautionary tale, let them. I'd spent my whole life waiting for their validation. And all it ever got me was a front row seat to their smug little parade. I was done clapping for them. This time, I was going to do something for myself. Something they'd never see coming. By lunchtime, the group chat had transformed into a shrine to my siblings' egos. Ethan posted a video of himself reclining in first class, all smug sunglasses and white teeth. The caption said, "Manifesting abundance. Some people just get it." I actually snorted. Sure. Some people just get it. And by get it, he meant get a free ride from Dad's wallet. Harper, not to be outdone, posted a photo of her matching luggage lined up like obedient little soldiers. Hashtag family success, hashtag work hard, play hard. I closed the app before my brain started leaking out my ears. If there was one thing my family excelled at, it was making ordinary moments look like coronations. They'd always had a talent for dressing up basic privilege as destiny. But the worst part? I used to swallow it. I used to believe maybe they were right. Maybe I really was the family's cautionary tale, the reminder to everyone else, don't end up like Dylan. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Mom, wrapped in her usual passive-aggressive sweetness. We didn't want you to feel out of place. Hope you understand. I set the phone down on the kitchen table, right next to my dented coffee mug. The same one I'd been using for years, its handle cracked and glued back on more times than I could count. I looked around the apartment. Linoleum floors, the second-hand curtains that never quite fit the windows, the battered laptop whirring like a dying animal. This place was mine. Every inch of it earned. But for once I let myself wonder, what if I didn't have to apologize for wanting something more? I pulled the laptop closer and opened a new tab. The brightness made me squint, but the search bar felt like an invitation. Flights to Santorini. Just typing it made my heart thud. Rows of options appeared. Economy. Business. First class. My finger hovered over the cheapest ticket, reflex, drilled into me by years of feeling undeserving. And then I pictured my dad's face if he ever saw the confirmation email. I could practically hear his voice. Where'd you steal the money for that, huh? You think you deserve luxury now? The thought made my chest go tight. But instead of shrinking, I felt something spark, something angry and electric. I imagined him sputtering, insisting I was showing off, humiliating the family, overstepping my place. And for the first time, I realized I didn't care. My hand moved to the business class option. The price was obscene. It made my palms sweat just looking at it. But I thought about all the times I'd said no to myself. All the years I'd eaten cold sandwiches while my siblings posted photos of their steak dinners. All the holidays I'd spent smiling while they unwrapped gifts I could never afford. I thought about the fact that no matter how small I made myself, it had never been enough to earn respect. So maybe it was time to stop trying to earn it. The laptop fan wheezed under the strain. My coffee had gone cold. My heart felt like it was going to crack my ribs. And I clicked. Book. The confirmation page flashed up, bright and final. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. If Dad ever saw this, he'd probably have a stroke. He'd call me irresponsible, delusional, pathetic. Let him. I closed the lid of the laptop and looked around my kitchen, the scratch table, the second-hand chairs, the life I'd built from nothing. No matter what he thought, I'd earned this. Not because I was trying to prove something, but because I finally believed I deserved it. When I woke up the next morning, for the first time in years, my first thought wasn't how am I going to get through this day. It was I'm going to Santorini. The idea still felt surreal, like maybe I dreamed it. But when I opened my email and saw the confirmation, business class ticket, confirmed, I felt a giddy rush that left me lightheaded. Then the panic set in. Because let's be honest, part of me was still convinced something would go wrong. That the airline would call and say, "Sorry, sir, this ticket is clearly a mistake. You're supposed to be flying in the cargo hold." I made coffee in my chipped mug, the same one Dad used to call depressing. I stared out the window at the cracked parking lot and tried to picture myself somewhere with blue water and white cliffs. It was almost impossible. My phone buzzed on the table, another group chat update. A photo of Ethan and Harper standing in front of some luxury resort, arms around each other like they were starring in an ad for nepotism. Family trip kickoff. So grateful. I didn't even bother rolling my eyes. It felt pointless. Instead, I opened a new tab on my laptop and started making a list. Passport, expired. Luggage, a single duffel bag I'd owned since high school. Clothes, mostly work uniforms and a few sad t-shirts. If I was going to do this, I wanted to do it right. Not just survive it, but actually enjoy it. So I dug into my savings again, savings I'd built from overtime and saying no to myself over and over. I ordered a real suitcase, the kind with wheels that actually worked. A couple of new shirts that didn't have grease stains. A pair of sunglasses that didn't look like they came free with a gas station fill-up. Each purchase felt like a tiny rebellion. Like I was proving to myself, one click at a time, that I wasn't stuck in the role they'd assigned me. My phone buzzed again. A text from Dad this time. "Hope you're not sulking. You know this trip just isn't your scene." I read it twice, then set my phone face down on the table. It wasn't even worth replying. Because he was right about one thing, this trip wasn't my scene. But my own trip? The one I'd chosen, paid for, and planned without any help? That was exactly my scene. Later that afternoon, I drove to the outlet mall to pick up the last of my travel supplies. As I walked past store windows, I kept catching glimpses of my reflection. Same work boots, same tired eyes. For a moment, I wondered if everyone around me could tell I didn't belong. Then I thought about how many times I'd stayed home because I didn't want to look out of place. How many invitations I'd turned down because I was afraid of that look, the one that said, "What are you doing here?" And I realized, no one was coming to rescue me from that feeling. I had to do it myself. So I bought the suitcase. And the shirts. And the sunglasses. And when I got home, I laid everything out on my bed like evidence that this was really happening. My phone vibrated one more time, another photo from the group chat. Ethan and Harper lounging by a pool, Dad in the background toasting them with some overpriced cocktail. I didn't open it. Because while they were all congratulating themselves for excluding me, I was quietly building something they'd never understand, a life that didn't revolve around their approval. 2 weeks later, I stood in my tiny kitchen at 4 a.m, staring at my suitcase. The new one, matte gray with shiny wheels that actually spun in a straight line. It looked so out of place in that cramped apartment it almost made me laugh. I barely slept. Part nerves, part excitement, part waiting for reality to slap me back to earth. But when my alarm chimed, I realized nothing was going to stop this. No last-minute guilt trip, no surprise bill, no convenient emergency designed to keep me home. This time, I was going. I loaded my bag into the back seat of my battered Corolla, still held together by zip ties and stubbornness, and started the engine. For a moment, I thought about texting Dad, just to see if some part of him would say good for you. I didn't. The drive to the airport felt like leaving an old life behind, mile by mile. The factories, the strip malls, the empty dawn roads, they all blurred past the windows as if I was finally outpacing the expectations that had kept me pinned in place. Inside the terminal, I felt completely out of my depth. Business class check-in had its own line, like a velvet rope to a club I was never cool enough to enter. The agent behind the counter gave me a smile that was almost too warm, like she'd been trained to recognize first-timers. "Going somewhere special?" she asked. I swallowed, suddenly aware my hands were shaking. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I think I am." When she handed me my boarding pass, I kept expecting her to look down and frown, to say, "Sorry, sir, there's been a mistake." Instead, she said, "Enjoy your trip." Like it was the most normal thing in the world. I walked through security and toward the gate in a daze, clutching my ticket like it might vanish. Boarding was surreal. They called business class first, and for a split second, I hesitated. My brain tried to convince me to let the other passengers go ahead, because surely I didn't belong at the front of any line. Then I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped forward. The cabin smelled like leather and fresh coffee. The seats looked like something out of a futuristic movie, massive, cushioned, with enough legroom to do lunges. I settled into mine and felt something I hadn't felt in years, ease. I didn't have to prove anything here. I didn't have to pretend to be grateful for crumbs. The flight attendant offered me a glass of champagne. My first instinct was to decline. It felt too indulgent. But then I thought about all the times I told myself I didn't deserve nice things. I took the glass. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I watched the sunrise streak the clouds in pink and gold. I imagined Dad seeing me there, imagined the way his face would twist in disbelief. "Where'd you get the money for this, huh? You think you deserve luxury now?" I smiled, tipped back my champagne, and thought, yes. I do. When we landed in Santorini, I stepped off the plane into bright, salty air that smelled nothing like the stale factory or the second-hand curtains back home. A shuttle took me up winding roads lined with whitewashed buildings and bursts of fuchsia flowers. Every turn felt unreal, like I was walking through someone else's dream. But it wasn't someone else's. It was mine. My hotel sat perched so high above the sea it felt like the world ended just beyond the balcony. When the receptionist handed me my key, she said, "Welcome to paradise." And for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch at the word. I let myself just stand in the doorway, taking in the suite. White walls, crisp sheets that smelled faintly of lavender, a little table set with a basket of fresh bread and olives. The sliding door was open to let in the breeze, clean salt air with a hint of something sweet, maybe lemon blossoms. I set my suitcase down and pressed my hand against the cool wall. This was real. I was here. It hit me all at once how long I'd been waiting to feel like this, like I wasn't stuck in the same old story. I thought back to a Christmas years ago, when Ethan had come home bragging about his New Year's plans in Bali. Everyone had oohed and ahed over his photos while I just sat there, sipping a warm beer, feeling like the carpet was about to swallow me. Dad had patted me on the back and said, "Maybe next year you'll do something big too." He'd said it with that flat, dismissive tone, like he knew damn well I'd never go anywhere worth mentioning. I remembered how small that made me feel. Like I was just filler in the background of their perfect lives. Standing here, thousands of miles from that living room, I felt something loosen in my chest. I wasn't the filler anymore. I unpacked slowly, hanging up my new shirts, arranging my things with care. Every small action felt like a ritual, proof that I had earned this. Eventually, I stepped onto the balcony. The sun was starting to sink, turning the sea into molten gold. Waves lapped against the rocks far below, the rhythm steady and indifferent. I breathed in the air, salt and flowers and the faint smell of grilled fish drifting up from the little tavern down the street. That was when I knew I had to post a photo. Not to impress strangers. Not even to get back at my family, though I'd be lying if I said that part didn't feel delicious. I wanted proof, for myself, that I'd finally stepped into my own story. I propped my phone against a glass of wine and set the timer. The picture caught me mid-smile, hair a mess from the wind, the Aegean bright behind me. My thumb hovered over post. In my head I could already hear Dad's voice, pinched with judgment. "What are you trying to prove, Dylan? You think this makes you somebody?" Harper would chime in with that syrupy condescension. "Wow, Grease. That's nice. For you." Ethan would probably laugh and say, "Hope you didn't blow your entire savings just to pretend you matter." I almost let that old doubt creep back in, the part of me that always wanted to shrink, to apologize first so nobody else could beat me to it. Then I thought about all the times I'd sat in that factory cafeteria eating a cold sandwich while my coworkers showed off vacation photos. About every holiday I'd spent telling myself maybe next year. This was next year. And I wasn't going to be embarrassed for finally choosing myself. I tapped share. The post went up with a single line. Turns out I'm not so unsuccessful after all. Almost immediately, my notifications exploded. Likes, comments, messages. My phone buzzed so hard on the balcony rail it nearly fell off. Then came the inevitable, the family group chat. Harper, wait, Grease? Since when? Ethan, did you win the lottery or something? LOL. Dad, what exactly are you trying to prove with this little stunt? I set my phone face down on the patio table. I didn't need to answer any of them. Maybe I wasn't proving anything to them. Maybe this was just the first time in my life I'd done something without asking if I deserved it. I poured myself a glass of wine, the bottle sweating in the warm air, and watched the last of the sun disappear behind the horizon. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was exactly where I belong. I should have known they wouldn't let it go. By the next morning, I had 15 missed calls from Dad and 2 from Ethan, as if they'd suddenly realized my existence was inconvenient in a whole new way. I sat at the little patio table, sipping coffee so strong it could have reanimated a corpse, and scrolled through the group chat. Dad, we need to discuss this immediately. Harper, is this about proving a point? You could have just talked to us. Ethan, honestly, this is kind of sad. I snorted into my coffee. Sad? Right. Nothing says sad like waking up in Greece with the sea view. I ignored them all. Instead, I threw on a linen shirt I'd never have dared buy before and walked into town. Whitewashed buildings glowed in the early light, the cobblestone streets still quiet. I bought fresh bread, a little tub of olives, and a slice of something the shopkeeper called Grandma's cake, though she wouldn't tell me what was in it. It tasted like warm sugar and freedom. By the time I got back to the hotel, my phone was ringing again. Dad. I almost declined it out of habit. But then I thought, no. I was tired of hiding. I picked up. Dylan. He began immediately, voice already sharp. What exactly are you trying to achieve with this stunt? I took my time setting down the bread and sitting back in my chair. Hi, Dad. Good to hear from you too. Don't be flippant. He snapped. You know what this looks like. Enlighten me, I said, swirling my coffee. It looks desperate, he said, as if pronouncing a final verdict. Like you're trying to compete. I almost laughed. Compete with what? You know exactly what, he insisted. If you think posting photos from some overpriced vacation is going to make you look successful. Dad, I cut in, my voice calm in a way I didn't recognize. I didn't do this to impress you. Silence. I could picture him standing in the kitchen at home, jaw clenching, that vein at his temple pulsing. You're being childish, he said finally. Wasting money to prove a point no one asked for. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe I'm just living my life. Another pause. You always were stubborn, he said like it was the worst sin imaginable. Yeah, I said. I guess I am. Don't come crying to me when this blows up in your face, he snapped. I smiled, leaning back to look at the sea. I won't. You think this changes anything? he asked, voice low. No, I said honestly. It doesn't change you. But it changes me. He didn't reply. Just breathed heavily for a moment, like he was about to say something else. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone. Once, a call like that would have sent me spiraling, trying to apologize, to explain, to shrink myself back into the version of me he could tolerate. But all I felt was relief. Maybe for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of disappointing him. I set the phone aside and tore off a piece of bread. The sky was turning that impossible blue I'd only ever seen in postcards. I thought of all the times I'd sat at family dinners, listening to them catalog their accomplishments like a competition I'd already lost. Here, there was no competition. Just me, my breakfast, and the sea. And honestly, I couldn't imagine anything better. I spent the next few days doing exactly what I'd always thought was reserved for other people. People with more money, more charm, more permission to be happy. I woke early every morning and walked down to the little cafe by the harbor. The owner started recognizing me by the third visit and set a cup of thick, sweet coffee on the table without asking. Sometimes I'd just sit there for an hour, watching the fishing boats drift in, trying to remember the last time I'd felt this, untethered. The messages kept coming, of course. Ethan, just admit you did this to make us look bad. Harper, it's sad you have to show off to feel important. Dad didn't text again. I think he realized there was nothing left to say. Each notification was easier to ignore than the last. Like every mile between us had stripped away the power their words used to have. On my fourth evening, I finally booked a table at the restaurant I'd been eyeing all week. The one with the white tablecloths and the view that made you feel like the edge of the world was just a fingertip away. I almost didn't go. My brain tried to talk me out of it the entire afternoon. Who do you think you are? This isn't for people like you. You're going to look ridiculous sitting there alone. But when the time came, I put on the new shirt I'd bought, combed my hair, and walked in anyway. The waiter treated me like any other guest. He didn't look at me like I was an intruder. He didn't ask if I was sure I could afford it. He just handed me a menu and welcomed me. Halfway through my meal, fresh grilled fish, crisp wine that tasted like sunshine, I realized I hadn't thought about what my family would say in over an hour. It was such a small thing, but it felt enormous. Later, back in my room, I stood on the balcony and watched the last sliver of sun sink behind the sea. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been, desperate, apologetic, always waiting for someone else to say I was enough. And I felt a quiet kind of grief for the time I'd lost. But I also felt something else. Pride. Not because I'd proven them wrong. Not because I'd bought a plane ticket or posted a photo. But because I'd finally learned how to choose myself without permission. I picked up my phone, scrolled to the family group chat, and read the last few messages again. Ethan's accusation. Harper's pity. I hovered over the group icon for a moment. Then, without thinking too hard, I tapped leave chat. A simple click. No fireworks, no drama. Just peace. The quiet that followed felt cleaner than any apology they could have offered. I spent my last day in Santorini doing nothing in particular. Walking, eating, sitting by the sea. I didn't take many photos. It felt like the memory belonged to me alone. When my flight home finally boarded, I felt a tug of sadness. But it wasn't regret. It was the bittersweet ache of finally understanding that you don't need to run from your old life to build a new one. You just have to stop letting old stories define you. I landed in my city past midnight. My car was right where I'd left it, rusty, loyal, waiting. As I drove home, the neon signs and cracked sidewalks felt different. Not smaller, exactly. Just less like a cage. I pulled into my lot, turned off the engine, and sat there in the dark for a minute, hands resting on the wheel. I thought about Dad, about the factory, about all the times I'd swallowed my voice. And then I thought about the balcony in Santorini, the salt air, the way it felt to be nobody's disappointment but my own. That was enough. More than enough.